Following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Easy Money New England.
Oh, can somebody help us here?
We can, because we are real estate and mortgage professionals.
Here you go. It says come in and browse.
That's right. Come on in, listen up and learn.
How long do you intend to browse?
In a short period of time, our panel will teach you some tricks that might make your house buying easier.
You don't ask her how long she intends to browse.
You might not be looking for a mortgage today, but we'll get you ready.
You don't look like browsers.
Are you looking?
Oh, what do browsers look like?
Yeah, maybe I'm half browse.
On his father's side.
This is Easy Money New England
Let's show the lady we're browse.
with your host, Brian DAmico.
Look at us, we're browse. One more word out of you and he gets it, all right?
Welcome to another edition of Easy Money New England. Today on our show, we have Michael Rice. Actually, Mike Rice, the mortgage guy. He's been in the business since 2003. He's been with New Fed Mortgage since, 7 years now. And today's subject we're talking about is divorce. Now, sometimes it's like, oh, divorce, it's cheaper to keep her, or it's why is it so expensive? Because it's worth it. I mean, we all hear funny things about divorce, but really when it gets down to it, it's a very serious item, especially when you have marital property together, or things are going to change. And Mike Rice actually is a certified divorce lending specialist. And Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Great to be here.
So, Mike, what made you want to get in? What made you want to get certified as a divorce lending specialist?
Well, in the mortgage industry, a large majority of transactions are coming out of the divorce market. And so the reason I wanted to get involved in it was to learn more about it and understand it, because it's not just the mortgage aspect of it. There's so many other aspects that are involved. And oftentimes you really need a team together so that when you're going through the process of divorce, right decisions are being made by all people involved, and not just talking the husband and the wife and the family. I'm talking about, having someone that understands it from the real estate aspect if you're selling the house. From a CPA aspect, there's so many tax consequences that are involved. Where's that going to change if this new tax bill goes through? I have no idea, but under the current guidelines in taxes, it really makes all the difference on what you can write off, what the exemptions are based on the real estate. So having a good, certified,
Mortgage originator. So Mike is a mortgage originator, and it's very important to even have that part of it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it takes a whole team. The attorney, you need everybody talking to each other to make sure that it's in everybody's best interest when you go to do something, whether it's refinance the house, sell the house. And it's just having everybody understand that, it's not your typical transaction if you're selling the house, because of the fact that you could make a decision that's going to cost you a lot of money in taxes down the road. So
Right.
There's other factors. It's just not as nice and easy. We're going to sell the house and be done with it. There's too many other factors involved. And that's why you want to have everybody. It's not just myself. It's having attorneys involved. It's your divorce attorney, your financial planner, your CPA. So it's having everybody on the team to understand it, so that it's when the transaction happens, you're not getting whacked with a huge tax bill.
And we all know people that have, I'm sure you have some friends that have been divorced. I know I have plenty of friends that have been divorced, and it's, there's always questions around it, like, hey, how did you do this, or how did you do that? And, what I don't think people realize is there's 2.4 million divorces every year in America. I mean, that's 46,532 per month, 6,646 per day, and one every 13 seconds.
Yeah, so basically,
And that's just in New England. No, I mean that's the whole.
So
country,
basically, since we started the show, there's probably about 37 divorces
37
that happen.
divorces. And yeah, you could talk, the funny part of it, but when it gets down to financing, there's nothing funny about it. I mean, think about if you built a house and you have, kids and family, and, you've built this whole life together, and you got to figure it out. I mean, you definitely got to figure it out. So number one is really get a good divorce attorney.
Absolutely, you want to have a divorce attorney. Everybody says you got a good divorce attorney, and everybody says you got to get that bulldog of one that, so that's the thing. You got to have yourself a good divorce attorney, but they also oftentimes, I haven't gone through a divorce, thank God, yet. My wife's listening. Sorry, hon. But it's oftentimes it becomes a very emotional thing, and people just want to get to an end. And that end, you could be making some decisions hastily that can significantly impact.
Right. So over
everything.
the years, we've both seen many divorce decrees, separation agreements, and sometimes they decide that they're going to sell the house. Sometimes someone stays on the house and is responsible for the mortgage, and sometimes it's a force to refinance it out so it gets out of the person's name off that mortgage. So I've seen it all different ways where, it says that you're not responsible for the mortgage anymore, but it's still on your credit report. And, does that...
Well, if it's written correctly into the divorce decree, there's so many different factors in the way which can happen in that situation where, it's still on your credit report. So if you go and, if your spouse decides to, screw you basically and not make the mortgage payment, that can affect things. So, in that situation, the first thing is protection. When I say protection, it means you need to, from day one that if you're out of the house, you need to be, you don't want to communicate. It could be a bad situation, but this is where the breakdown usually hurts the most. It impacts the credit because everybody shuts down and they decide, well, the hell with it, I'm not going to pay the mortgage. Well, you have to make sure you keep paying the mortgage because otherwise it's affecting both of your credits. And down the road, it's going to impact what you can do, whether you can refinance, whether you can buy your spouse out, whether you can sell and buy a new house. That's where the number one thing I see happen in divorces is someone decides to not pay the bills.
I also see that people kind of run up the credit cards towards the end because they may or may not be on it. So you might be in a bad credit situation before this even happens.
Absolutely. So that's the thing is, if if a friend comes to me and says, "Hey, listen, I'm getting divorced," the first thing I'd say is, "Congratulations." No, I'm kidding. But the first thing I'd do is I'd be like, "Listen, if I were you, I would, go to like a Credit Karma or right now, all of your credit cards are offering free credit reports. Get your credit report so you know what you have, because there's stuff on there that if your wife or spouse or whoever it is an authorized user on it, you need to get them off because then they can still charge up the cards. And we see that happen. People get bitter. They charge stuff up. So that's the first
But some
thing.
people end very nicely. It works out very nicely.
Yes, absolutely. It happens all the time. I know a lot of people like that.
Yeah. It starts off that way sometimes. So credit's obviously a major important factor when you're going through this process because, getting a mortgage, what a lot of mortgage people don't realize or mortgage lending people don't realize is if there's a divorce situation, there's different ways of pricing in that loan where you get a better rate versus
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest mistakes that loan officers make when doing something like this is they'll treat it as a cash out refinance. So if I'm selling and I have to buy my wife. Now, if I have to buy my wife out, for example, if it's written into the contract that it's an equity buyout, then it's considered an equity buyout. You don't face the typical Fannie Mae pricing hits that you would, because then it would be considered a cash out. Once you go cash out, your rate's higher. And it's affected. So it's very important that it's written in there that it's an equity buyout situation so that it keeps us away from, a cash out transaction. You're limited on the cash out transaction where an equity buyout, you have more leeway. But that is the number one mistake loan officers make, I find, that they don't even understand that, there's an equity buyout is not a cash buyout.
Yep.
And it's all about having the contract, and it goes back to the attorney and having the contract drafted correctly.
All right. Well, sounds like a pretty heavy subject. Let's take a word from our sponsors, and we'll come right back afterwards.
It's a new day. It's a new way. Call 877-NEW-FED-1. It's a new way.
Hi, folks. It's Brian DAmico, owner of New Fed Mortgage, and I'm really excited to introduce Fast Track Mortgage, our new online system that gets you approved in less than 15 minutes. Whether it's a refinance or a new purchase, just go to newfed.com anytime, day or night, and click on the Fast Track Mortgage button. Fill out the form, and within 15 minutes, we'll approve your loan at the lowest rate possible. Don't waste time dealing with big banks. We're local and here to help you close your loan fast. Just go to newfed.com 24/7 and get approved in less than 15 minutes. Fast Track from New Fed Mortgage. Now that's a new way to get the loan you need fast.
877 New Fed
Subject to credit approval, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 1881. Call us to the website for details.
877 New Fed 1.
We're back. The music's going? Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much, Stu. So back to our subject, divorces. And, again, very serious subject, even though we all have our jokes. 47% either sell or refinance the marital home. So, and I'm hearing numbers anywhere from 55% divorce rate now versus 55 to 60.
55 to 60 is the latest I heard.
That's insane, right? So I'm hearing, usually you hear about bachelor parties, now you hear about divorce parties, you're hearing about, all this stuff. So it's very common in our industry because, when stuff like this happens, there's always some type of transaction that's going to happen.
Yep.
It's going to be a refinance, or someone's going to buy it off each other, or they're going to sell the house and it becomes a real estate sale.
Yep.
So what's some of the advice you can give them? I know we talked about, getting the right team together. So if you're a divorce attorney out there and you have clients that are looking for a real specialty advice when it comes to mortgages and refinancing, look no further than Mike Rice, the mortgage guy. I mean, you don't just do divorce cases, but you also originate.
Oh, I originate,
Plenty of loans.
purchases, refinances, and everything, and divorce is just a small piece of what I do. But with the divorce, where 55-60%, is what we're looking at for the divorce rate. The biggest thing, typically speaking, the biggest marital asset is the house, and it's also the ones that it becomes the most personable because people, if one spouse is leaving and they need someplace to live, the other spouse wants to stay in the house, and if there's kids involved, that they don't want to disrupt the kids. A divorce is disrupting everything as much as it is. So this comes down to, okay, what do we do with the house? Typically speaking, there's three ways to divide to divide the house.
Yeah.
You can sell the house and divide the profits, nice and easy.
Yeah.
You can one buys the other out, which is what we often see, and then both stay on the deed, and then you sell later down the road. If in that case, if you're both staying on the deed, you got to make sure the payment's being made. Oftentimes, down the road, I see that someone goes, they say, "Yep, we're finally selling," and then but I'm going to buy a new property and use the proceeds from the sale finally, and I pull their credit, and nope, you missed your payment,
I have
2 or 3 times.
I have one now that it's a gentleman, and he's still on the credit report, and it became a short sale because she stopped making the payments, and because she stopped making the payments, it went to foreclosure, and they ended up doing a short sale. So they sold the house for short, they sold their house for less money than what they owed, and he had no control over that.
Yep.
I mean, he had a little control because I have a feeling, not positive, but I think it's about 99% true, is that he wasn't making his child support payments. So, there's also, I mean, there's still some obligations that you have from the child support, the alimony, and whoever's keeping the house. It's very important that you keep that thing current.
Absolutely, and that's why I often say, I recently had a client and the husband's staying in the house, and that's fine, but the wife is the one that was on the note. He wasn't originally on the note, but he's responsible for the mortgage. And my suggestion right to her is he pays you every month and you make the payment.
Yeah,
because once you find out, if it'll be too late by the time you find out that a payment's been missed. Because oftentimes you don't find out. You might get a phone call, might get something, but you often don't realize that a payment's been missed. And a 30-day late on a mortgage payment, you're probably looking at 100 points dropped on your credit score, and everything is credit score. And it's definitely going to impact your ability to, purchase or refinance.
So if I'm driving right now, or I'm driving down the street listening to this podcast, and I'm saying to myself, well, there's a good chance I'm getting divorced, and if I'm in the middle of this, what are some of the pitfalls that you could like just avoid right away? Like just a lot of times people just do it themselves. They just go to the court and they get it stamped and they're good, right?
But yeah, I mean, you can just go. I mean, amicable. We hear that.
Yep.
There is a percentage
Starts that
of them
way.
that everything starts out amicable.
Yeah.
We're going to handle this because it's but at the end of the day, it's one of the bigger financial transactions you're going to end up making. Not just the house aside, but you're splitting assets. You're splitting the house. Like I said, go back to the first thing I would do is get your house in order. And
Yeah.
when I say get your house in order, like I said, find out, what credit cards, if you're leaving your significant other, get your own credit report. There's so many, freecreditreport.com, Credit Karma, and then, as well as all the other stuff that you have on your credit cards. You have access to your credit report. Go out there, be proactive about it. Go out, get a copy of your credit report. See what's on there.
Yeah.
See what cards you have, what your balances are, and then also see which cards that you're an authorized user on. Because if I have a card and you're an authorized user, and we get in an argument, you can go run that card up. You're authorized to do so, but the other person's the one that's on the liability to do it. So the first thing I would say is get the credit report. The other thing is down the road, it gives you a snapshot of, okay, this is where I am today. So if we say, okay, there's $5,000 on the credit card, you don't do anything, and next thing you know, your spouse runs up another 10 on it. That's going to come into play down the road. That's when amicable goes out the window.
I also see that when you have a separation agreement or divorce decree that says that someone's responsible for that payment, if it just says they're responsible, do you have to prove that that was paid? So say they have to go back to their husband or their wife and say, hey, look, I have to prove that you were making these payments because it's on my credit report. Typically you have to go back 12 months to prove that they paid it.
Yeah, 12 months is typical of thing. There are some specialty guidelines in there that, if it's on the credit report, I want to say it's 6 months, that if you can show that the divorce decree or separation agreement's in place and that they're liable for it. In some circumstances, they'll go and they'll say, okay, well, 6 months.
Right.
Because this person's not liable for it.
We see that a lot. So, I mean, obviously you're already stressed enough as it is going through a divorce. To make it easier, if you call Mike Rice the mortgage guy, he's all over the internet. Mike Rice the mortgage guy. At least he'll make the mortgage part of it easier for you, more stress free, because there are a lot of mortgage originators out there that just don't understand this part of the transaction. So talk about a little bit, Mike. How much did you learn by becoming a certified divorce lending specialist? I mean, did you see a lot of case studies? Did you see a lot of things that really said, "Oh, all right, this is something I really need to dive deeper into"?
There was in the process. There was a lot of case studies done, and there's so much aspect behind it. A lot of it, seems pretty common sense, but it's just learning. Okay, well, having the proper team in place, is the biggest thing, because you just want to make sure everybody's communicating so that a bad decision isn't made. And a bad decision could be something that's written into the contract. Divorce attorneys, they're doing their job, but they're not financial planners, or they're not tax advisors. So you really need to have 4 or 5 people that are technically involved in the transaction, because of the fact that I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to say, oh, I wouldn't do that or I wouldn't do this, and well, what's your tax implication? You know what? I don't know, because it's so convoluted. So having the team in place and getting the answers, and that's one of the things that I learned, is putting some people around me that understand it and are willing to work in that team environment, so that it's everybody's making the right decision at the end of the day, that doesn't impact the client. You could see a $50,000 tax bill.
Yeah.
That because it just wasn't written the right way.
Wow.
You don't know, because you get into capital gains. You don't know how long people have lived in the property for. A divorce attorney's asking all these questions. I don't know. Am I asking all the questions? I try to, but
Right.
I'm asking the questions I need in order to transact the loan. But you got to if everybody's working together, you're covering all your bases.
Makes a lot of sense to have a team in place, because a lot of times you see that one person might have a great attorney, one person does not, and then you can kind of see that based on the separation agreement how it was structured.
Oh, absolutely. The separation, I've seen so many separation agreements over the 15 years I've been in business, and it's
It makes you
it's
cynical
amazing.
after a while reading so many separation agreements. You're like, oh, jeez.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I just had a girl come to me, and she had told me about 7 or 8 months ago that they were getting divorced, and she was going to do something. I said, okay, this is what you need to do. Went through everything. She followed all the steps, and then we got down to it, and we're trying to. She sold her house, and she's trying to buy a new house, and that's great. And it's like, but the way in which the husband was paying the child support,
Cash. Yeah, that doesn't help.
it doesn't help. It's like, we need stuff, and I thought I had explained it to her, and she said I did, but they shared a checking account, and this one was amicable, which is great. But the problem that you run into is that what they thought they were doing the right thing wasn't the right thing, because now all of a sudden we go to qualifier. We need that $1,000 a month of child support to help her buy her new house for her new family, and it just didn't. She can't, because of the fact that the husband, the way in which he paid her, he was handing her cash, or he was just depositing some extra money into their joint checking account.
Right. So the rule of thumb on child support payments or alimony even is 6 months.
6 months.
So
You need to show 6 months proof of it.
in a perfect world, it would be what the separation agreement says. You see that check going into your account every month.
Yep.
I mean, that makes it very simple just to get that condition right off of the commitment line.
Absolutely. That's the thing, is you want to see 6 months. So we need to see 6 months. In this situation, she didn't. So now she started in August.
But if
Okay.
it's cash and you could see that it kind of makes sense, you could probably make a story around it. But a lot of times, they get the cash. They might, say it's $1,000. They might put $200 in the bank, keep the $800. Then it makes it
You
impossible.
can't
to
track
identify.
it. That's
You
the
can't
thing,
track
is
it.
everything needs to be tracked, and that's the problem.
But if every month they were putting $900 in and they were just holding back $100, you could probably make a case for that because it
Right.
showed consistency. But you definitely want to have a paper trail of everything that you do when it comes to alimony, child support, because you won't. 9 times out of 10, you're going to need that income to qualify.
Right. And oftentimes people don't realize that they start the divorce process, and they want to sell the house in the middle of it, or one buy the other one out. Once it's in the court, we have to wait till everything's completed. We can't just, the court knows. We check records and stuff, and they see the proceedings in place. So it's either to do it ahead of time, or you then have to wait until the divorce is 100% complete.
But if the divorce is complete, is there a time frame where they already started these payments, or do they wait till the divorce is complete?
No, the payments can be, in this situation with this girl, the payments, they were in a separation agreement.
Separation. Okay.
So the separation is before the divorce. So they had hammered everything out. Then
Then they wait
because you're waiting in Massachusetts, for example. I think you wait 90 days
for it to be final.
to be final.
I've seen divorces go a year.
Yeah. Well, that's 90's amicable. But that, yeah, I mean, I've seen, I have a couple of buddies, businesses and stuff, and you're talking, I've seen them go a year and a half.
Yeah.
And it's just long and drawn out. And at the end of the day, they'll all tell you the same thing. Who wins?
What's it?
The attorney.
The attorney. The War of the Roses, right? That was
Exactly.
a movie like that divorce thing. War of the Roses. But yeah, no, fascinating topic because it is common. It's more and more common every day, and you should definitely look at it when it does happen to you. There's a 60% chance it might. So I mean, obviously, you want to make sure that you have a team in place. So all right, so we talked about divorce. What about is there any specialty when it comes to when you first say I'm on the other part of this, I'm just getting married, or you're just getting married and you want to buy a house? No specialty there, right? It's not really it's just your common forward mortgage.
It's a common forward mortgage, but an example: a young couple comes to me. Yep, Michael. We're getting married. Okay, we're buying a house together, but we're not married yet. We're buying a house together. We're gonna get married in 3 or 4 years. I actually have something like this very similar going in. The fiance is bringing a lot of money to the closing table. It's the person you love. I get it, but it's still, you have to protect yourself. And the thing is by having some sort of an agreement up front, I would recommend, because if you're bringing a lot of equity to the house, you're bringing $100,000, and the other person's bringing nothing but then to help pay the bills. You want that outlined.
Yeah.
Because 60% chance down the road, I don't know what it is, what what the percentage is from people that are engaged that don't get married.
Well,
That
it's
adds.
funny you should say. I was just at we had a meeting with a president of a podcast before like a couple weeks ago. And, Elise Jewell is down in Reading, Mass, and he was telling me that he sells quite a bit of engagement rings, but he also buys quite a bit of engagement rings coming on the other side because people come to him all the time and say, "Take this ring." He's like, "Well, I can make it a pendant." No, I don't want any part of it. Just buy it off me. And he's seeing a lot more of that. So I mean, it's important because engagements do break off.
Right. It's your biggest you're purchasing a house. It's the biggest asset that you're probably going to purchase in your lifetime. It just goes into hey, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but if you're bringing a lot of money into it, you need to have that discussion on what happens if we do break up. What's the equity split?
Right.
And a lot of people don't take that extra step, and then down the road, it's like, okay, because you have, what's brought into the marriage, what's fair, what's equitable, how you're going to distribute things. So it's all stuff that,
And I'm sure it's not an easy conversation to have, but
it isn't. It's almost like, imagine, you say, I need a prenuptial agreement, you go prenuptial, people, I don't,
Well, it's getting divorced before you get married. And
Right.
There's nothing happy about a divorce, so you're creating all the agony beforehand.
Exactly.
But, down the road, you got to protect your assets.
Well, that's it. You have to protect your assets. And then, the other part of it is, when we move forward, you and your fiance, you're buying a house, you want to have a conversation with the attorney on how you want to hold title to the house, because that makes a difference as well.
But what's the difference when you hold title? There's joint tenants.
Joint tenants is joint tenants with rights of survivorship.
Tenancy in common.
Tenancy in common. I mean, it's right now, if you're not married and one of us passes, it depends on how you have it. You could have it set up so that the other person gets everything in the house, or maybe if you have children, or maybe you have your parents. Your next of kin is the one that typically is going to get that part of the asset, unless you have it set up so that it's rights of survivorship. So basically, the first one dies, everything goes to the remaining spouse.
You bring up a good point, because if you want to buy a home, can you buy it, and have your child as a beneficiary? Would you buy it as into a trust?
You can always put it in a trust. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's once again, that goes into the
and again,
planning.
Talk to your attorney. Every person's situation is different, but I see a lot of people putting homes in a trust lately.
Well, I mean, you see a lot of people putting homes into real estate trusts, and that's that a lot of that gets into as you get older. It's protecting the assets, so that if you have to go into a nursing home or something, it's protecting the asset.
Right.
So you're buying something, you should always look to protect the asset. And you have a 40-year-old guy, is he really worried about a look back period for Medicaid down the road by putting it in a trust?
Right.
Probably not, but at some point. But the other thing is, these guidelines change all the time.
Right.
Massachusetts used to be a 3-year. Now I believe they're a 5-year look back now.
Yeah.
For Medicare. So there's so many factors involved, and that's why it's not just talking to a mortgage person. It's going the extra step and getting the answers from a financial planner or your accountant, an attorney, a state attorney.
A state attorney, yeah, it's very important, because there's so many different vehicles, and just every day there seems to be another bill in Congress. They're trying to shut this down or this loophole down, and there's always changes to the. And I know, like, for example, we had a show last week, 1031 exchanges, and we were talking about personal property. Well, they just took that away last week. You can't exchange. I don't know if it passed, but it's in the bill that you can't exchange personal property for personal property. You can still do it with real estate, but you can't do it cars, boats, airplanes. They're taking that right off the table. So, I mean, that's just an example of how things change all the time. So, if you're buying a home, or obviously if you're getting divorced, you definitely want to put the team in place, because it's a high stressful situation as it is. The last thing you want to think about is to make sure that your finances are ordered and that you're drawing this thing up the right way for the future. Obviously, for the benefit of your children, if you have children, it makes it a lot easier if there's no children involved, obviously. But it's still a difficult process. So with that said, Mike, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, not really. If you are, I will say if you are someone that is in a situation, and you need someone to talk to, I can be reached at 781-241-1254. It's New Fed Mortgage out of Danvers, Mass.
NMLS number?
47904.
Yeah, my NMLS number for the regulators out there, 20400. NMLS number for the company, 1881. And, you'll also see on Mike's website, you'll see that he has many testimonials. He has probably one of the most testimonials I've seen in the business, because he does take a real special approach to his clients. I mean, he fights for you guys. He calls me up and yells at me all the time to make sure things close on time. So, I mean, he definitely fights for his customers. Maybe a little bit too much, but, I mean,
You'll get over it.
But, yeah, definitely reach out to him. Mike Rice, the mortgage guy, New Fed Mortgage. And, Stu, you have anything like that? Any questions?
No questions. I'm happily married. I'm a homeowner. I don't have a trust. I'm approaching my 60s, so that's of concern. And I'll probably be speaking with Mike over a cup of coffee when the podcast ends today.
Great. Podcast Cafe. We're in Salem, New Hampshire. There's a great coffee shop upstairs from Two Guys Smoke Shop. And thanks. That's, we'll be talking to Jim Cross a little later today. He's in the studio audience. So thanks, Stu. Thanks,
you.
everybody, and I'll see you next week.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.